Hey, Tony, you ever like remember in Overboard, that show, that movie with Kirk Russell and Goldie Hawn and all that stuff? And they say at the end, it's a hell of a day at sea, sir, all that sort of stuff. That's what it feels like this morning. It's a hell of a day here to be.
Listen, Dave, like in the words of Yogi Berra, when I come to a fork in the road, I take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, welcome in for take 3 of us trying to get this live stream going here. It looks like for the moment, everything might be working. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all of you around the world, right? Depending on where you are. Happy Royal Rumble Day for the pro wrestling fans out there. It is one of the biggest days of the year for those of us in the pro wrestling side of things. Podcasters, obviously the wrestlers and competitors and fans who are over in Saudi Arabia. We will be back later on, Tunney and I, and who knows who might join us in later on for Attitude of Aggression to give you our live reaction to the Royal Rumble after it's done. But that's then, this is now. And right now, we are coming in here to talk to you guys about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Episode 2. Hard salt beef, Tunney. I mean, I sense some sort of connotation there, maybe, but, I don't know. Maybe
It's a very aggressive attitude you got there, Dave.
It is a little bit aggressive. That's for sure, man. Oh, geez. Man, yeah, my apologies to anybody watching at home for we just, how in the world, you can't, I don't know. It's an X problem. It's a studio problem, but we had to reconnect like multiple times. Get X running. YouTube's like, dude, we're sitting here. We're fine. What's your fucking problem? But anyway, that's beside the point. But we are going to talk to you guys here today about Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Episode 2, and get in that. DJ can't be here this week. He literally just got off the ship, just pulled into port, dropped an anchor. Who knows what about, I don't want to get into his personal life and what he's got to do when he gets home, but, he can't be here this week, but he will be back, I'm sure, for Episode 3 when we hit the halfway point. Episode 2, man, Night of the Seven Kingdoms. A lot of the stuff that we said that on the first episode, the things you talked about, things going on behind the scenes started to really rear their heads this week on Episode 2, especially Egg and his real backstory. You get to see some of that stuff develop. Before we start digging deep into the minutia of this, first off, Tunney, how you doing, man? How are things going over in Wisconsin? And what's your overall thoughts on Episode 2?
Things are good here. We're warming up. We're into the 20s today for the first time in like 3 weeks. But no one cares about that. We're fine. We're good up here. Like Dave said, big wrestling day. Go back and listen to all the stuff on Chairshot Radio Network, getting ready for today. And then, like he said, a little later, come back and check us out again. But as far as our Game Gone Wrong podcast and the Game of Thrones universe, this series, based on the Hedge Knight, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, I'm loving it with every scene that I get to watch, right? The relationship between Dunk and Egg is at the forefront of this entire show, and it's continuing to evolve and keep you interested. Just the whole setup of being around this tournament, and then we get to see the beginning of it here. It's just another fun episode. I'm already starting to get sad because I know in 4 weeks we're going to have to wait like another 18 months to get the second season of this thing. But for now, I'm just really happy that this first 2 episodes have been really, really good, intriguing, attention-keeping.
Yes. Different. It's a different sort of series. We said that with Episode 1, and this continued that theme. Different doesn't necessarily mean worse, though. I mean, this has got a different feel to it. It's still grounded within that Game of Thrones universe, you can tell. And we're going to talk about some of the more subtle details about that as we go along here on this episode here. But there's like right now, there's 2 really good shows going on right now. You got A Night of the Seven Kingdoms and Wonder Man going over on Disney Plus, which is, I'm halfway through that as well, which is really good. Yeah. So we got the doorman and the clause about the doorman and that sort of thing. But we'll probably talk about that more on Bandwagon Nerds tomorrow. But let's break down this episode a little bit and talk about some of the stuff happening here in Episode 2 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Hard Salt Beef was the name of the episode. We kind of get going with Dunk is still going around. He's trying and largely failing to continue to get vouched for. He wants to get into the games, wants to make the lists. He's going around Ashford Meadow. He's making the case that he's telling stories about Sir Arlen of Pennytree, but it's painfully clear that Arlen left nobody really remembers this dude. Of course, for those of us who watched the episode, who saw the opening scene of this, it's awfully hard to forget. Arlen Pennytree. My wife was it was a great thing, man. She was just like shocked, because you don't see that, right? You never see. I mean, they of course glorify women's bodies all the time, and that's no, I'm not going to complain about that. But for the dude to come out looking like, wow, did Pornhub sponsor this, or what is going on here with Game Gone Wrong?
Looked like
He's
a baby's
literally
arm holding an apple.
it really did. Even like my wife's big question was like, "That's uncircumcised, right?" I'm like, "Yes, dear. They did. We're not snipping the knights back in the days of Night of the Seven Kingdoms." But yeah, the early part of this is Dunk going around trying to get anybody to vouch for him. And people are like, "I have no idea who the hell this guy is you're talking about. Arlen who?" Oh, early on in the episode, it's not looking good for our hero as he's just trying to get somebody. Does anybody remember this guy? So, I mean, and it's kind of sad because you get to see in this episode Dunk's relationship with Arlen to a certain extent, and the I don't know about love, but certainly the respect and reverence that he had for Arlen as they went along, and it's clear from this opening stuff that people don't remember him quite as fondly or at all as you do, Dunks. What do you think of the early parts of this, Tony, where Dunk's going around trying to find somebody to vouch for him and just having a really hard time with it?
The flashback was interesting, right? They actually showed like leading up to the death and everything finally. But yeah, him going around, he still hasn't learned the lesson of who you're he it's let's put it this way. Here's an opposite analogy. Like I have cats, right? Well, these little cats, they actually think they're people because all they see
Yes.
is people, right? Well, Duncan doesn't realize that he's a freaking giant and everyone holds him in a completely different regard. And really, all he has to do is go out, demand it, and take it, and it'll be given to him. But he is not aware that he's able to do such things yet.
Right. And there's a definite he's going to have to grow into his role and kind of gain in that
He
confidence
doesn't,
because he's really it's
right.
been beaten out of him a little bit.
That's the word right there. He is not nearly as confident as he should be with the frame that he is carrying around.
Exactly. I mean that is a great way to put it. And people and there's certain people who are imploring him, hey, step into the role. Even Egg kind of gets on him a little bit as we go along, but it's something he's going to have to grow into, and that's okay. Big moment happens early on in this episode. The Targaryens arrive, sans dragons. There's no dragons here other than the paper mache one that spits fire. But the Targaryens show up. Yeah, and there's no dragons, but there's an aura. The kids love to use the word aura to describe things. These guys have all that aura about them as they show up. And, you get to see the Targaryens kind of like the people who are going to more than likely be involved in this tournament. You get to see Prince Baelor, Prince Maekar, I think is the name, and Prince Aerion is, and you already get the feeling that, oh, there's the douchebag Targaryen that we were waiting for. Obviously Prince Aerion, who's already just being a prick. And as this is going along, the Targaryens show up as this is all revolving around Dunk trying to get vouched for this tournament. He's actively getting questioned and challenged about his legitimacy. People around the tourney areas, including the knights, including this douche nozzle Arion here, pressing him on whether are you truly a knight? So, the pressure on Dunk is mounting. He's dealing with this issue that you talked about, Tony, where he's got this crisis of confidence where he's trying to step into the role. And meanwhile, on the other end, you've got everybody else around him, or most everybody else around him, who are really kind of going on him and saying, you don't look like a knight. You don't feel like a knight. You sure you're a knight? So you've got all this stuff going on. So let me kick it back to you. Your thoughts about the arrival of the Targaryens. And the big thing is, we talked about last week, Egg's true lineage. Spoiler alert, non-spoiler alert. If you're tuning in right now, we are not spoiler free, that sort of thing. Obviously, if you're tuning in, you probably already know some of this stuff had happened, I would hope. But we know what Egg's true lineage is. And he sees the Targaryens arrive. He immediately is like, get me the hell out of here sort of scenario. Because I think he's on Dunk's shoulders when they show up initially. And he's like, quickly put me down. He knows he's going to be recognized. That is going to play itself out a little bit more as we go along here. But let me go back to you now and ask you, the arrival of the Targaryens, certainly a big moment early on in this series.
I'm wondering where the other son is because Daeron's also missing. That's one of my questions. I wonder if we're going to get to that. But yeah, Maekar and Arion, what, Baelar's son Valor Targaryen as well. And then the Kingsguards member. I think one of the most interesting things was, he goes and like that dude gets kicked by the horse and Dunk calms the horse down, right? Like you can see there's certain things that he is just natural at and really probably better at than other people. And one of them is connecting to the animals, clearly. But then he gets to talk to like the Kingsguard guy and talking about like being a knight and how did you get there and like, oh, I was just a crabber. But then we find out, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but we get to a spot where like he kind of has this little confidence in him thinking, oh, well, if a lowly crabber can become in the King's Guard, and he's talking with Egg, what's stopping me? And Egg's like, he owns the entire fucking fleet, dude. He's not
Yeah,
just a crabber, he's the
right.
crabber.
That's
So it's
right.
just some fun, interesting stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. And that is coming up where Egg and he reveals and like Dunk's like, how do you know that? And Egg kind of like
I like
realizes that
crabbing.
he's
He says
yeah,
something
I
like
like
that.
crabbing. He quickly realizes that he's shown his cards a little bit too much in that moment and he backtracks. But yeah, that was a cool moment as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on very early on in this episode that's really ratcheting things up. I think like and kind of like staying on the Egg subject, you there's like this missing prince, and there's stuff that's going on in this episode that is subtle but is there. Like Dunk overhears, and this is one of the tie-ins directly to this thing. You don't know it yet, but it's going to make sense. And if you're following along with the show, we're going to help connect some dots for you guys so that as these events occur in the show, you'll be like, that's what Dave and Tunney were talking about. There's an aspect of this episode where Dunk overhears that Makar's children are missing, including Aegon, who is actually Egg. That's who Egg actually is. And this is pushing him closer into the whole Targaryen web of things. And I think, isn't this the one where they say that the kids are probably dead? And he
No,
kind of go,
he goes like in closing or something after the whole thing of him being caught eavesdropping and coming in, and like the whole experience end up being really positive for him. He puts his foot in his mouth once again. Like we talked
yes,
about some of the things he's good at. He goes, I I trust your children won't be found dead or something like
right,
that. And it's just
right.
like, dude, you don't even speak that into the ether.
And the look on Makar's face when he says that is classic. He's like, motherfucker, what? But it's interesting because yeah, the kids aren't dead. One of them's there in the camp. And so, where Makar is probably thinking something may have terrible befallen his children. One of them's there in the camp right now. He just doesn't know it yet, and that's Egg. But the big moment of this scene that you're talking about, I mean, as subtle as that is, and that's a smaller part of the whole grand story that the Makar's kids are missing, and they're not dead. They're just in a different place, right under your nose. But the big moment here is Baelor vouching for Dunk. And this unlocks the rest of the story, essentially. So Dunk takes a shot. He's going to talk to Baelor and try and once again see if anybody remembers Sir Arlen of Pennytree. Baelor does remember him, and he agrees to vouch for Dunk so that he can enter the tourney. And it was interesting because it was like, it sounds like Sir Arlen of Pennytree had dismounted Baelor in one of these sort of jousts or sort of situation, which was, equivalent to a really big upset. And I think Makar's like, you're going to let him in just because this guy got lucky and unseated you from your horse? How many years ago was this? And Baelor quickly emerges as like a stand-up dude in
Yeah,
this scene.
100%.
Somebody who's gonna, maybe buck the trend of his own family a little bit, realizes there's something. Because, yeah, not all the Targaryens are batshit crazy or power hungry or, want to dominate the world. There's a few here and there who have values, and Baelor is one of them. There is a catch to this whole thing, though, because Baelor basically tells Dunk, look, you got to make your own name. If you're going to come into this tournament, you need your own coat of arms because you can't. He's like, you can't. Basically, it's like you can't live under Sir Arlen's shadow forever, nor would you really want to. So it's like, get your own coat of arms, get your own shield, do all this sort of stuff, and you're in. I'll go to you now. This is a big moment another big moment early on in the series where Dunk gets what he needs to get into the tournament, to make the lists, and to be a part of this event. So what were your thoughts on that, Tony?
It's definitely the most interesting part of this episode is the conversation, like when he gets caught and has to come in, and how like he works his way to getting into the tournament, right? But now it's a whole new set of problems that we're going to encounter, as he's got to go find armor somewhere, right? He's got to start looking the part of the knight. I think there's other things that are going to start to cross his mind as we get towards the end of this episode as well. But like the journey is really just the real battle to get into the tournament now has begun, right? First you needed permission, now you need the resources, and unfortunately he's got to do something that he does not want to do.
Right. Right. And this has obviously bigger implications because we get the scene with him and Egg and Tansel, who he goes to Tansel because she's a very skilled artist and is asking to draw the coat of arms and that sort of thing on the shield.
The new sigil or whatever
Yeah,
it was supposed
the
to
new
be.
sigil, exactly. And Dunk has he's got no clue what to do. It's Egg who comes up with the idea of the what is it, an elm tree
Oak
and
tree.
oak
Tree?
tree,
I think it's an
or
oak
is
tree.
it oak or elm? I don't know. It might be elm. I'm not
Let me
sure.
ask Grok.
Yeah, ask Grok if it's an elm or an oak. I thought it was elm, but it's Egg who comes up with this idea, and Tansel agrees to do this. And this is kind of, you feel it early on. Okay, this is Dunk's romantic interest. And this is where he gets his way in to getting closer to her and their relationship, which you got to figure is going to further and blossom. And of course, it's Game of Thrones. So you're like, I hope it doesn't end too quick in the most disappointing way possible. But it is an important moment because you get to see this relationship. And Dunk he's massively sweet, but very awkward. And it's not just, as far as his relations with the rest of the townsfolk, it is clearly with Tansel, who he's smitten with, as we said in the first episode. But anyway,
You're right again. You're right again, Dave.
It happens.
But
it's
but
rare.
we also need a shooting star above it.
Yes, yeah, because and that ties back into the first episode with, do we make our own luck and that sort of thing. So exactly, and Tansel's like, sure, I can do that. The other aspect of things is like he's got to get his own coat of arms, and he goes to the blacksmith in Ashford and talks to him, and the blacksmith's like, sure, I'll do it for X amount of dollars. Well, Dunk doesn't have that kind of money.
It was like 800.
800, right. Dunk really doesn't have that kind of money. And then I think he's putting his stuff back, and I think the guy says like 600 or something like that.
Well, Dunk tells him he can give him 200 and a smaller man's armor. And the guy goes, I forget his name, I only sell my own shit, right? And then as Dunk's about to walk away, the guy's like, gives out a sigh as if like in his head, he's like, why am I such a nice guy?
I can use the metal.
I can use the metal. Just come by, whatever.
Right.
Oh, goodness.
Right. And so to pull off the 200 aspect of things, Dunk has to sell the horses. And one horse. Yeah. And this breaks his heart to do this because like you were saying earlier, Tunney, his connection to animals is very strong. And for him to go and give up the horses, like the horse like this, yeah, it really guts him. And you can tell it guts him, and he has a really hard time doing it. And he's telling the stable boy who takes the horse, here's some money, give her some oats tonight. So he wants the horse and he's talking to the horse saying, once I win, I'll come back and get you. But that's a tough moment for Dunk because, like you're saying, he is like the horse whisperer in many ways. And for him to have to walk away from, one of his favorite creatures, obviously, is tough. But certainly, at the grand scheme of things and what he's got to do what he's got to do. And, this whole thing comes in. There's some other stuff that's going on this episode. We get the tug-of-war, which was interesting, with Egg at the front of the tug-of-war and Dunk at the back. And
Lionel Baratheon is like, he reminds me of Tyrion, the way he is. He's boastful, braggadocious. He actually has your back more than you think, even though he does weird shit. But he likes to be the center of attention, the main guy, the one who does it all. Like they're like starting to. He's like, I'm thirsty. What? Yeah, I know. I'm thirsty. And comes right back in and gets all the glory, right? He knows who to befriend, that guy. But that was an epic scene when Dunk puts his legs up and he's just hanging off the rope like he doesn't want to get his shit all. Egg. Yeah, Egg, my bad. It was great. And the horse's name that he sold was Sweetfoot.
Sweetfoot. Okay. Yeah, so there's some fun revelry going on, and I like what you said about Lionel Baratheon. He just like, you've seen Kingpin, right? Right? So the scene where they're raising the barn and they ring the dinner bell and Woody Harrelson just walks away and they're all struggling to keep this, 2,000-pound wall up or something like that. And he goes out, nobody runs for, runs for the dinner bell in the middle of listing of 2,000-ton wall. Yeah, that's kind of Lionel reminds me of what was Woody Harrelson's brother, Brother Roy. That's right. He reminds me of Brother Roy a little bit in that scene where he just kind of like in the middle of the tug of war, he just gets up and leaves, goes and gets a drink. I'm
Great scene.
thirsty. It
Great
is. It's a
scene.
great scene. And they win the tug of war thanks to Dunk. So it was all good. But yeah, funny stuff all the way around. We move into the tail end of the episode and man, they watch the jousting that goes on. And it's Dunk and Egg, and they're watching this big jousting going on. And Dunk really sees the skill level of these knights that he's about to go against. And it's a wake-up call for him, Tunney, and not in the best of ways, because it really challenges his notion of can he compete? Because I think up until this moment, he thought, yeah, I can hang in there with these guys. And when he sees these knights in full glory, and what they can do on these horses, especially the one guy who is able to like get up off the ground, grab a horse as it's running by, mount it, go and pick up his sword and get right back in the fight. It's a huge wake-up call for him. Egg thought the whole thing was marvelous, spectacular, invigorating. I'm sure it's not the first joust that Egg has ever seen. So he's used to this sort of thing. And for him, he's looking at it as the sporting event that it is, mixed in with, combat and all that sort of stuff. So for him, it's a different experience. For Dunk, he's probably never seen anything that really comes close to this. And now he realizes I'm going to be stepping in the ring, so to speak, against these guys. And, this kind of goes into that whole crisis of conscience sort of thing, even after, Dunk is in the tournament, but he watches this thing and, he's starting to wonder about, God, no one remembered Arlen. What does that say about me? He's basically his protege, his prodigy. Egg kind of talks him down off the wall a little bit, but I think that was the thing I took away from the end of this thing is just kind of the realization of the grandeur and the scope of what he's about to step into and the odds that he's facing, the obstacles he's facing, and that sort of thing. It's a big moment for me, I thought, in the show. What do you think of that, Tony?
For lack of a better term, the bloodlust that Egg has while watching this is just like you can see him come alive and is enthusiastically paying attention, observing. And to your point, yeah, the realization, the reality is setting in on Dunk that he's not just like he's happy to be in the tournament, it's what he wants, but now he's got to realize like he could die. Like, I think it's hitting him that these fights aren't as chivalrous as he thought they might have been glorified in his head, right? He never really knew or seen a knight kind of be underhanded when necessary. So I think he's going to be questioning how far can he push himself, not physically, because I don't think he has any worries about the physicality, but the mental fortitude it's going to take to be successful. That's all hitting him really hard, I think. Whereas on the other hand, Egg's like, I'm here. Let's do this. You're huge. No way we can lose.
And I think that goes into the central theme from this episode is that with Dunk, it's not about his skill or his size or anything like that. It's his status and him inside his own head, right? And that's really where I think this episode starts to dive down into that and kind of peel the layers back a little bit and say, here's what's really going on with Dunk is that we know he's got the size. If it's a straight up one-on-one fight, take the horses out of the equation, just him versus another knight. Yeah, he's got a great shot because he's got size and power, and that's tough to match.
What was Pedro Pascal's character from Dorne that should have killed the mountain? I can't remember. But
yeah,
unless you have fighting skills like that, you're probably going to lose to Dunk one-on-one.
Well, and that's a good comparison because, whoever Pedro Pascal, Oren, yeah,
Orion?
whatever.
No, I'll look.
I'm sure you'll look it up. But that's a great example because he had tremendous fighting skills. But in the end, it didn't matter because he was overpowered and killed, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's a good one. You've got another thing that's going on with this thing is,
Prince Oberyn Martell.
Yeah, Oberyn Martell. That's
News
right.
O.
It was an O. Although it seems like this tournament in Ashford seems kind of relatively small by the standards we're used to in the Game of Thrones universe. I think that's kind of a microcosm of what's going on here is that a lot of the stuff that happens, it's a smaller scale. We've condensed everything into this one place, whereas Game of Thrones used to be so expansive. And
it's important enough, though, to have Targaryens, Baratheons, and Tullys, though, right?
Right, right. It's a small tournament, but the political stuff that's going on in Game of Thrones that makes it so fascinating, it's all here in this real condensed, isolated area. Because yeah, you've got all these families, you've got Targaryens, Baratheons, all these names you're familiar with. So it's like, sure, this tournament may be small in scale, but maybe not in scope because you've got all this other stuff going on. And I think the other thing is Prince Baelor, and this is just stuff that we know that we're going to kind of, go ahead a little bit and kind of like, not spoilers per se, but
Do you know
things
what,
to keep
Dave?
an eye on.
We're watching a show that sits in between two other shows that we've already watched. So we know where we've been. We already know where we're going. So I think it's better if you're a fan, if you're a really big fan, to know why this story's being told and how, like, think about his new crest, his new sigil on his shield, whatever, right? Like, Brienne of Tarth uses a similar type of thing, and it probably directly comes from the success of a hedge knight here, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I completely agree with how we're doing this. Listen, folks, if you don't want to know, then come back and listen to everything after you've watched the series or whatever, because we're going to make these connections along the way. Because for us, I think we think it's the smartest way to do it. We want to know more. We want to be more connected because hopefully we're going to get past where we've been as well.
And I think like along those lines, the Baelor connection is a big moment in this series because it is somebody who's highborn, who's the first one to really vouch for Dunk and say, yeah, this guy belongs here. And it also bucks the trend that, like we were saying earlier, all Targaryens are evil, mentally deranged bastards. Baelor's an example of somebody of a rarity, like what Dany used to be before things kind of went off the rails with her, but yeah, it is Baelor coming in there. He's got a moral compass, and that's different for a lot of the Targaryens, but he becomes a huge focal point for Dunk as we move forward in this thing. The show's mission statement, make your name for yourself, really becomes a mantra in this episode. That's juxtaposed against the problem that Aerion, who is the polar opposite of Baelor as far as the Targaryens. Now, Aerion, he definitely steers into that whole skid of what we're used to with the Targaryens. And you could tell right away, right off the bat, Aerion, you get the feeling that, okay, his goal is not just to win this tournament, but win it convincingly, dominate, humiliate, basically assert your will and impose your will against everyone and everything else in this tournament and probably in that village as well. When it comes right down to it, Arian is one of those dominating guys who, Daemon Lannister, who I think they even mention him in this episode, right? From House of the Dragon. Daemon is one of the, I think
Well,
he gets mentioned.
Damon,
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, Daemon Targaryen. He gets married and well, I just screwed them all up there. But
definitely
but he
not a
gets
Lannister.
No, he's definitely not. But he gets mentioned in this episode in passing, but it's kind of interesting. And you just get to see there's already these choices being made, hard decisions having to be made in this episode, especially on Dunk's side, where what do I have to give up to get this opportunity? Which even if he doesn't realize it yet, this is the life-changing opportunity for him. And it's going to define who he is moving forwards. Stuff like that I took away from this stuff with Egg, where you're starting to see his true nature emerge a little bit more. He's still trying to be like super supportive to Dunk and that sort of thing where it's kind of funny. Like, he watches Dunk go through all this stuff, right? He go through all these machinations and going around the village trying to get vouched for, where in reality, Egg probably could have done it for him right off the bat and said, yeah, I
Well,
vouch, but he's
yeah,
not going
but
to
then
do that.
he doesn't want to go home though.
You're
Like, he
right.
ran
He
away
doesn't want
for a
to,
reason. Like,
he
my
doesn't
whole
want to
thing
out.
now thinking is at some point Dunk's gonna be confronted by Targaryens as to why you didn't tell us that you had our son, and he's gonna have to go, I didn't know who he was. He's just some little boy, a little stable boy. But there's just so many cool things happening right now, and you hit it on the head. The difference here, yeah, it's a little bit less, demonstrative, over the top. It's a little more subtle, but at the same time, like the population density of importance, because we're just in this little setting, is really cool. And to me, that's how it's a little bit different. But I'm in love with the characters, the story. I can't wait to see how everything goes with his artist girl that he is falling in love with. I can't wait till we finally get him in a nice set of armor that fits him and how intimidating that's going to look. I think him maybe possibly, I know they don't have mirrors. Maybe he'll be at a lake and see his reflection or something and know how awesome he looks. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to. We're a third of the way done already, folks. So strap in, hold on. I can't imagine the pace is going to slow down here in the next couple episodes. So.
No. So the title for episode 3, as far as I could tell, is called The Squire. So I think we get an idea of where we're going with episode 3, and that's going to be heavily egg-centric. I'll throw this to you first, honey. What is your biggest question about episode 3 as we transition from 2 to 3? Like, what are the biggest things you're looking for in this next episode, which does debut tomorrow night on HBO Max?
I wonder if we're gonna get to Dunk in the tournament, his first, I mean, there's got to be multiple rounds and battles or whatever for him. It's a tournament, stages, whatever there is. I wonder when we're going to get that first one there. And you talk about Egg, like what kind of squire could he really be to this giant in these type of games? So yeah, I guess those are the couple different things for me. It just centers around obviously our duo that's in the forefront of every episode.
Yeah, I think, the things that stand out for me going in here is, like you're saying, where are we with the tournament? Does the tournament actually get going in this episode? Because at some point, if Egg's really going to be Dunk's squire, he's going to have to publicly reveal himself, right? And then everybody's going to see that.
Or he's going to wear something different.
Yeah, or cover himself. Maybe, yeah, exactly. He wears something to cover his true identity. Does is somebody going, because Dunk right now in episode 2 is walking around camp with Egg, and Egg's pretty much out there, even though the Targaryens arrive. You got to figure sooner or later somebody's going to recognize him, right?
Yeah, but you got to think right now, okay, like he's in rags, right? He's not wearing anything really nice. And I feel like he didn't have a bald head when he left, right? So I would imagine they're not that might be catching them off. Like, why would a little Targaryen boy have a bald head?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's really good. He may have done that as a means of concealing his identity, and that would make more sense.
Well, that way, like, he's just out in public, not a big deal. But if he came face to face or got stared at long enough by someone who knew him that didn't just overlook a bald little poor boy and saw his eyes or nose and mouth together and
heard his voice.
That's his voice. Sound and smell capture memories way more than a lot of even visuals, folks. It's scientifically proven.
Yeah. Good points all the way around it. I didn't think about that. Dunk may have shaved his head as Egg may have shaved his head as a means of avoiding detection, that sort of thing. I think the other thing to keep an eye on as we move into episode 3 is obviously the relation between Dunk and Tansel, because that's an Achilles heel. That's a weak spot. It always is. Love and that sort of thing always rears its ugly head in the worst ways in this Game of Thrones universe.
But if the love is true, Dave, they always end up being there for each other when they need it the most in the end.
Until one of them gets decapitated. Yes, you're absolutely right. They are there for them up until that moment.
In the face.
Yeah, in the face. But I do anticipate we'll see some progression on the relationship between Dunk and Tansel, and it does become an issue though as to is that the weak point? And you get that, and Arion, who's obviously going to become a bigger antagonist, a bigger prick as we move along. I think he's just I mean, yeah. There are certain characters in Game of Thrones who you just look at and it screams douchebag in your head, right? Ramsay Bolton is one of those big douchebags. Daemon, to a certain point, at some point, yeah, that sort of thing. But that kind of dissipates. That waxes and wanes with that series. But Arion early on is like, oh yeah, he's a prick. Even Oberon, Oberon of Martell, like you were saying, he was an arrogant, pompous jackass, but he wasn't a douchebag. Yeah, he wasn't a douchebag.
All he literally had to do was push the blade in and dude would have been dead, and he didn't. He mocked him, and then he got his Achilles, and he was done.
Yeah, speaking of Achilles, that sort of thing. Yeah, good stuff all the way around. Show is excellent so far. It's really What did I say?
So my mom grabbed me by the back of the ankle and dipped me in the river. That's how I got my name. How'd you get your name, Testicles?
Yes, good stuff. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I greatly enjoy the show so far. It is appointment viewing for me and my wife right now, as is Wonder Man. That sort of thing. It's fun all the way around. Wonder Man has been, we won't talk about too much, but definitely
Excellent.
another excellent, a very different sort of series. Ben Kingsley is absolutely
I said the
crushing.
same thing. I said the same thing yesterday at work. So
What, that Ben Kingsley is just
yes, amazing.
he's just, and that's and I forget the guy who plays Simon, Yaya something. I can't remember his
Yeah,
full name.
you're yeah. That's yeah yeah. I forget his name.
This is a better role for, like, he was Black Manta in the Aquaman series
Yes,
as well, and I think this is a better fit for him. But yeah, it's a surprisingly very good series. I still don't know how this ties into anything that's going on with the MCU right now, but hey, we'll figure that out as we go along. Good stuff. Before we cut out of here, Tunney, last minute Rumble predictions. Who's going to WrestleMania, man? Who's going to WrestleMania? Who wins the men's? Who wins the women's?
Yahya Abdul-Mateen.
Thank you.
Joe Pantaleone made a nice little cameo in one of the episodes as well.
He did. Yes, Cypher.
You're a dick, Joe Pantaleone.
That's right. Exactly. I love that.
I picked Roman and Bianca on DWI yesterday.
I'm with you.
Go back and listen to that if you guys want to. We had Ray Cash on there. That was excellent to get him on there. He hadn't talked wrestling in a while.
Not since the Swaggy Awards. I make him talk wrestling.
Yeah. I think there's no reason to not have Gunther retire AJ. There's a possibility Gunther could retire AJ and then win the Men's Royal Rumble as well, but I'll stick with my Roman prediction. And then what's the other match that's going on?
Sammy and Drew. That's the interesting one. Because
I think the last match of the night. Okay, here's the thing. If it's the last match of the night, Sammy wins. If it's
Sammy's
not,
winning.
he doesn't.
Yeah,
But I predicted him to win.
I agree with most of what you say there. I think if Bianca's healthy enough to go, I think
If
she
she's
wins.
there, she wins.
Yeah, to set up her and Jade. Roman is obviously my pick as well. However, whatever we're setting up, I think Roman wins. If Bianca's not healthy, then it
Liv.
gets like pretty wide open. I think Liv is a really good choice as
Or
well.
you could have
Roxanne might be a good choice.
You could have Rhea or Io if you're trying to get to that by Mania as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the women's is a little bit more unpredictable simply because we don't know Bianca's status. The men, it's time to get the OTC back to winning and majorly involved in all this stuff. The AJ Gunther thing is a tricky one.
I think Gunther retires him. It's his storyline. He retired Goldberg. I think you
He
do a
retired
disservice
John.
because he retired Cena. That's the biggest thing. You can retire Brock in Minnesota in August. You can retire Jericho at some point. Like you can retire Randy Orton and when I mean, like there's so much going that they have him there. I think it'd just be really. I mean, and I was pretty passionate about it on DWI. It would be so stupid if he didn't retire AJ.
Well, they may try and insult your intelligence, Tony. You never know. They got to do something different.
That's my ambula oblongata.
But I agree with you about Sammy. If he goes on last, he is leaving Saudi Arabia with that championship. And that would be, I'm all for it, man. Let's Sami Zayn as the world champion has kind of a nice ring to it. I kind of dig
Not the
that.
world champion, as the undisputed WWE champion.
Yeah, the undisputed WWE champion. I saw CM Punk was doing the countdown show. But, people who tuned in for this, they don't care about that.
They might.
Tony, before
They might. And if you do, come back to the same Bat channel, only maybe 15
hours.
minutes. Maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes after Royal Rumble finishes.
Yeah,
We'll be back
4 hours
right here.
and 15 minutes from now, come back to the same Bat channel.
I don't think the show goes that long. I think the show's like 3.5 hours. There's only
probably
4 matches. We'll see. We'll see. Who knows?
Well, they're good. I mean,
excited.
they're not AEW and throw out 5 and 6 hour pay-per-views, but
and folks, I'm going to start drinking when we're done with this podcast, but I waited till then. So I'll be drunk, but I'll be here after the Royal Rumble.
Well, maybe we'll both be drunk. It makes for good podcasting. Tony, let people know where can they check you out on social media. Talk about the chair shot, man. It's back. The social media connection has been, I would love to know the backstory as to how that came into being, but we'll talk about that amongst ourselves.
Sure. Yes. Follow at Chairshot Media. That's CHAIR, Chair Shot, SHOT Media on X, and turn on your notifications, and you'll be notified every time an article or a podcast or a review or analysis, brand new link pops up right there, thechairshot.com. But follow me at PC Tunney on X, on other socials as well. But if you want to get my attention, I will respond on X and thechairshot.com. Like I said, prowrestlingtees.com/thechairshot. But of course, right here, you're listening to Attitude of Aggression. Go to the website, folks, attitudeofaggression.com. Dave does a great job over there. He's got it all segmented out, whether you're into UAPs, whether you're into dragons, like we are here talking today, or whether it's wrestling.
It sounds like here's one with both.
It's just, it is Saving Silverman, right? But no, follow me at PC Tunney, and please continue to listen to everything me and my bestie here do.
Yeah, thank you so much, my friend. As far as me, you can follow me on X at AttitudeAg. That is at AttitudeAGG. Tunney already pimped the website, attitudeofaggression.com. Go and check that out. You can check this out on Instagram at Attitude of Aggression, all one word, which auto feeds to the Attitude of Aggression's Facebook page. And yeah, check out the YouTube channel, Attitude of Aggression's YouTube channel, where even stuff that's not coming out through the Attitude of Aggression stream per se is showing up there. Four Corners, Bandwagon Nerds, it's all there on the Attitude of Aggression's YouTube channel. But that's going to do it for this episode. We'll be back, of course, sometime next week to talk about the Squire and see what happens with Dunk and Egg next. Enjoy the Royal Rumble. As Tunney said, check back here in about 4-ish hours.
Yeah,
something
probably
like that.
Right around there.
Right around 4 hours from now, we'll be back to give our live recap of the Royal Rumble event. Who's going to WrestleMania in Vegas? We're going to find out in just a few minutes from here. Until next time, enjoy A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. The salted beef is particularly nice. I hear that.
Yum, 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 yum.
We'll catch you guys soon for next week. DJ will be back next time. You guys enjoy the Royal Rumble. Enjoy Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Enjoy Wonder Man. We will talk to you guys soon.